Excerpt from Captain Stormfield's Visit to Heaven by Mark Twain. Chapter 2, Part 2. Well, they had shining faces and shining robes and wonderful rainbow wings, and they stood 18 feet high, and wore swords and held their heads up in a noble way and looked like soldiers. Did they have halos? No, anyway, not the hoop kind. The archangels and the upper-class patriarchs wear a finer thing than that. It is a round, solid, splendid glory of gold that is blinding to look at. You have often seen a patriarch in a picture on earth with that thing on. You remember it? He looks as if he had his head in a brass platter. That don't give you the right idea of it at all. It is much more shining and beautiful. Did you talk with those archangels and patriarchs, Sandy? Who, I? Why, what can you be thinking about, Stormy? I ain't worthy to speak to such as they. Is Tomich? Of course not. You have got the same mixed-up idea about these things that everybody has down there. I had it once, but I got over it. Down there they talk of the heavenly king, and that is right. But then they go right on speaking as if this was a republic and everybody was on a dead level with everybody else, and privileged to fling his arms around anybody he comes across, and be hail fellow well met with all the elect from the highest down. How tangled up and absurd that is. How are you going to have a republic under a king? How are you going to have a republic at all where the head of the government is absolute, holds his place forever, and has no parliament, no council to meddle or make in his affairs? Nobody voted for, nobody elected, nobody in the whole universe with the voice in the government. Nobody asked to take a hand in its matters, and nobody allowed to do it. Fine republic, ain't it? Well, yes. It is a little different from the idea I had, but I thought I might go around and get acquainted with the grandees anyway. Not exactly splice the main brace with them, but shake hands and pass the time of day. Could Tom, Dick, and Harry call on the cabinet of Russia and do that? On Prince Gortschakoff, for instance? I reckon not, Sandy. Well, this is Russia, only more so. There's not the shadow of a republic about it anywhere. There are ranks here. There are viceroys, princes, governors, sub-governors, sub-sub-governors, and 100 orders of nobility, grading along down from grand ducal archangels stage by stage, till the general level is struck where there ain't any titles. Do you know what a prince of the blood is on earth? No. Well, a prince of the blood don't belong to the royal family exactly, and he don't belong to the mere nobility of the kingdom. He is lower than the one and higher than the other. That's about the position of the patriarchs and prophets here. There's some mighty high nobility here, people that you and I ain't worthy to polish sandals for, and they ain't worthy to polish sandals for the patriarchs and prophets. That gives you a kind of an idea of their rank, don't it? You begin to see how high up they are, don't you? Just to get a 2-minute glimpse of one of them is a thing for a body to remember and tell about for 1,000 years. Why, Captain, just think of this. If Abraham was to set his foot down here by this door, there would be a railing set up around that foot track right away, and a shelter put over it, and people would flock here from all over heaven for hundreds and hundreds of years to look at it. Abraham is one of the parties that Mr. Talmadge of Brooklyn is going to embrace and kiss and weep on when he comes. He wants to lay in a good stock of tears, or 5 to 1 he will go dry before he gets a chance to do it. Sandy, says I had an idea that I was going to be equals with everybody here too, but I will let that drop. It don't matter, and I'm plenty happy enough anyway. Captain, you are happier than you would be the other way. These old patriarchs and prophets have got ages the start of you. They know more in 2 minutes than you know in a year. Did you ever try to have a sociable, improving time discussing winds and currents and variations of compass with an undertaker? I get your idea, Sandy. He couldn't interest me. He would be an ignoramus in such things. He would bore me, and I would bore him. You have got it. You would bore the patriarchs when you talked, and when they talked, they would shoot over your head. By and by, you would say, "Good morning, Your Eminence. I will call again." But you wouldn't. Did you ever ask the slush boy to come up in the cabin and take dinner with you? I get your drift again, Sandy. I wouldn't be used to such grand people as the patriarchs and prophets, and I would be sheepish and tongue-tied in their company, and mighty glad to get out of it. Sandy, which is the highest rank, patriarch or prophet? Oh, the prophets hold over the patriarchs. The newest prophet, even, is of a sight more consequence than the oldest patriarch. Yes, sir, Adam himself has to walk behind Shakespeare. Was Shakespeare a prophet? Of course he was. And so was Homer, and heaps more. But Shakespeare and the rest have to walk behind a common tailor from Tennessee by the name of Billings, and behind a horse doctor named Saka from Afghanistan. Jeremiah and Billings and Buddha walk together, side by side, right behind the crowd from planets not in our astronomy. Next come a dozen or two from Jupiter and other worlds. Next come Daniel and Saka and Confucius. Next a lot from systems outside of ours. Next come Ezekiel and Mohammed, Zoroaster, and a knife grinder from ancient Egypt. Then there is a long string, and after them, away down toward the bottom, come Shakespeare and Homer and a shoemaker named Marius from the back settlements of France. Have they really rung in Mohammed and all those other heathens? Yes, they all had their message, and they all get their reward. The man who don't get his reward on earth needn't bother. He will get it here, sure. Well, why did they throw off on Shakespeare that way and put him away down there below those shoemakers and horse doctors and knife grinders? A lot of people nobody ever heard of. That is the heavenly justice of it. They weren't rewarded according to their deserts on earth, but here they get their rightful rank. That Taylor Billings from Tennessee wrote poetry that Homer and Shakespeare couldn't begin to come up to, but nobody would print it. Nobody read it but his neighbors, an ignorant lot, and they laughed at it. Whenever the village had a drunken frolicking to dance, they would drag him in and crown him with cabbage leaves and pretend to bow down to him, and one night, when he was sick and nearly starved to death, they had him out and crowned him, and then they rode him on a rail about the village, and everybody followed along, beating tin pans and yelling. Well, he died before the morning. He wasn't ever expecting to go to heaven, much less that there was going to be any fuss made over him, so I reckon he was a good deal surprised when the reception broke on him. Was you there, Sandy? Bless you, no. Why? Didn't you know it was going to come off? Well, I judge I did. It was the talk of these realms, not for a day like this barkeeper business, but for 20 years before the man died. Why the mischief didn't you go then? Now how you talk? The like of me go meddling around at the reception of a prophet? A mudsill like me trying to push in and help receive an awful grandee like Edward J. Billings? Why, I should have been laughed at for 1,000,000,000 miles around. I should never heard the last of it. Well, who did go then? Mighty few people that you and I will ever get a chance to see, Captain. Not a solitary commoner ever has the luck to see a reception of a prophet, I can tell you. All the nobility and all the patriarchs and prophets, every last one of them, and all the archangels and all the princes and governors and viceroys were there, and no small fry, not a single one. And mind you, I'm not talking about only the grandees from our world, but the princes and patriarchs and so on from all the worlds that shine in our sky, and from billions more that belong to systems upon systems away outside of the one our sun is in. There were some prophets and patriarchs there that ours ain't a circumstance to, for rank and illustriousness and all that. Some were from Jupiter and other worlds in our own system, But the most celebrated were 3 poets, Sa, Bo, and Soof, from great planets in 3 different and very remote systems. These 3 names are common and familiar in every nook and corner of heaven, clear from one end of it to the other. Fully as well known as the 80 supreme archangels, in fact, whereas our Moses and Adam and the rest have not been heard of outside of our world's little corner of heaven, except by a few very learned men scattered here and there. And they always spell the names wrong and get the performances of one mixed up with the doings of another, and they almost always locate them simply in our solar system, and think that is enough without going into little details such as naming the particular world they are from. It is like a learned Hindu showing off how much he knows by saying Longfellow lives in the United States, as if he lived all over the United States, and as if the country was so small you couldn't throw a brick there without hitting him. Between you and me, it does gravel me the cool way people from those monster worlds outside our system snub our little world and even our system. Of course, we think a good deal of Jupiter because our world is only a potato to it for size. But then there are worlds in other systems that Jupiter isn't even a mustard seed to. Like the planet Gubra, for instance, which you couldn't squeeze inside the orbit of Halley's Comet without straining the rivets. Tourists from Gubra, I mean parties that lived and died there, natives, come here now and then and inquire about our world, and when they find out it is so little that a streak of lightning can flash clear around it in the 1/8 of a second, they have to lean up against something to laugh. Then they screw a glass into their eye and go to examining us as if we were a curious kind of foreign bug or something of that sort. One of them asked me how long our day was, and when I told him it was 12 hours long as a general thing, he asked me if people where I was from considered it worthwhile to get up and wash for such a day as that. That is the way with those Gubra people. They can't seem to let a chance go by to throw it in your face that their day is 322 of our years long. This young snob was just of age. He was 6,000 or 7,000 of his days old, say 2,000,000 of our years, and he had all the puppy years that belong to that time of life, that turning point when a person has got over being a boy and yet ain't quite a man exactly. If it had been anywhere else but in heaven, I would have given him a piece of my mind. Well, anyway, Billings had the grandest reception that has been seen in thousands of centuries, and I think it will have a good effect. His name will be carried pretty far, and it will make our system talked about, and maybe our world too, and raise us in the respect of the general public of heaven. Why, look here. Shakespeare walked backwards before that tailor from Tennessee and scattered flowers for him to walk on, and Homer stood behind his chair and waited on him at the banquet. Of course, that didn't go for much there amongst all those big foreigners from other systems, as they hadn't heard of Shakespeare or Homer either, but it would amount to considerable down there on our little earth that they could know about it. I wish there was something in that miserable spiritualism so we could send them word. That Tennessee village would set up a monument to Billings then, and his autograph would outsell Satan's. Well, they had grand times at that reception. A small fry noble from Hoboken told me all about it. Sir Richard Duffer, Baronet. What, Sandy, a nobleman from Hoboken? How was that? Easy enough. Duffer kept a sausage shop and never saved a cent in his life, because he used to give all his spare meat to the poor in a quiet way. Not tramps, no, the other sort, the sort that will starve before they will beg. Honest, square people out of work. Dick used to watch hungry-looking men and women and children and track them home and find out all about them from the neighbors, and then feed them and find them work. As nobody ever saw him give anything to anybody. He had the reputation of being mean. He died with it, too, and everybody said it was a good riddance. But the minute he landed here, they made him a baronet, and the very first words Dick the sausage-maker of Hoboken heard when he stepped upon the heavenly shore were, "Welcome, Sir Richard Duffer." It surprised him some, because he thought he had reasons to believe he was pointed for a warmer climate than this one.